The room fell silent as her fingers touched the strings. Nobody had noticed May until now, the quiet custodian they'd mocked for months. But as the first haunting notes of Paganini filled the concert hall, their laughter died in their throats. Some talents can't stay hidden forever. Some people can't be invisible forever. Sometimes the universe demands justice in the most unexpected ways. Before we dive into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from. Steam rose from the gleaming floors of Westridge Conservatory as Maya mopped the grand entrance hall. Morning light spilled through stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscope patterns across marble surfaces that reflected like mirrors. She worked methodically, her movements efficient and unobtrusive. Students rushed past, instrument cases bouncing, against their designer clothes, none sparing her a glance. Maya tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear and continued working. Her calloused hands moved rhythmically, pushing the mop in precise patterns. The conservatory smelled of lemon polish and ambition. "Watch it!" A tall young man swerved to avoid her mop, his violin case nearly clipping her shoulder. "Sorry, Mr. Reed," Maya murmured, stepping back. Elias Reed, the conservatory's star violinist, marched past without acknowledgement. Professor Harmon appeared at the top of the grand staircase, her silver hair pulled into a severe bun. "Maya, could you finish quickly? Dean Wallace is touring. Donors through in 15 minutes. "Of course, Professor." Maya nodded, increasing her pace. The conservatory buzzed with preparation for the upcoming showcase. Posters lined the walls. Westridge Elite Performance Series, featuring our brightest stars. Maya paused briefly before one, studying the names listed in gold lettering. Elias Reed topped the bill. She finished mopping just as the first donors arrived, then slipped away through a side corridor, invisible as always. Maya's apartment was a single room above a laundromat, its walls vibrating with the constant rumble of industrial dryers below. She set her bag down and opened the warped closet door, pushing aside uniforms to reveal a battered violin case tucked in the back corner. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "You coming to dinner? Made too much again?" Maya smiled. Her elderly neighbor's accidental cooking surplus happened twice weekly. "Be there in 20. Need to shower first." She unclasped the violin case carefully. Inside lay her grandfather's violin, the varnish worn where his fingers had pressed for decades. She lifted it gently, positioning it under her chin with practiced ease. No sheet music sat before her. She played from memory, eyes closed. Theo, first notes of Bach's chaconne filled the tiny apartment, transforming the humble space. Maya's fingers flew across the strings, her whole body swaying with the music. This was her true self, not the silent custodian, but the musician who practiced nightly after exhausting shifts, who studied recordings and technique books borrowed from the conservatory library, who played until her fingers bled and then played more. When she finished, she sat quietly, the violin cradled in her lap, then carefully returned it to its case before heading to Mrs. Chen's. The next morning brought the first humiliation. Maya cleaned the practice rooms during lunch break when most students disappeared to nearby cafes. She worked quickly, dusting shelves of sheet music and wiping down piano keys. Practice room C's door stood ajar. Inside, she could hear Elias Reed struggling with a difficult passage from Paganini's Caprice No. 24. He repeated the same 16 measures, each attempt faltering at the same spot. Maya paused in the doorway with her cleaning cart, waiting for an appropriate moment to enter. Elias glanced up, his frustration evident. "I need to practice," he snapped. "Come back later." "I'm sorry, but I need to clean all rooms before afternoon sessions," Maya replied softly. Professor Harmon appeared behind Maya. "Is there a problem? I'm trying to work on my showcase piece, but I keep getting interrupted." Elias gestured irritably at Maya. Professor Harmon frowned. "Maya, please adjust your schedule around our students' needs. Mr. Reed is preparing for a very important performance." "Of course," Maya nodded, backing away. "I'll return later." "Actually," Elias said with sudden inspiration, "she can stay if she wants to hear how Paganini should sound." He positioned his violin dramatically. "Maybe you'll learn something." He launched into the piece again, but tripped over the same passage, cursing under his breath. Professor Harmon winced slightly. That section needs work, Elias, she said gently. Perhaps try breaking it down note by note. Maya, still standing in the doorway, spoke without thinking. The problem is your wrist position during the string crossings. Both Elias and Professor Harmon turned to stare. Excuse me? Elias's voice dripped with disdain. Maya's face burned. I just meant, you're the janitor. Elias laughed incredulously. Are you seriously trying to give me violin advice? Professor. Harmon's expression softened with embarrassment on Maya's behalf. Maya, please finish your rounds in the other wing. Mr. Reed needs to concentrate. Maya nodded, heart pounding as she pushed her cart away. Behind her, she heard Elias's derisive snort. Cleaning lady thinks she's a violin teacher now. What's next? The second incident occurred 3 days later in the main hall. Maya polished the grand piano while a quartet rehearsed nearby. 4 students, including Elias, worked through a Dvorak piece for the showcase. Their cellist, a serious girl named Claire, kept missing her entrance after a complicated transition. After the 5th attempt, the group took a break, frustration evident. Claire studied her sheet music with a furrowed brow. You're coming in too. Beats early, Maya said quietly, not looking up from her polishing. The quartet fell silent. Claire stared at Maya in surprise. What did you say? Elias asked, his tone dangerous. Maya wished she could disappear. Nothing. Sorry. No, you clearly have opinions about our playing, Elias continued, stepping toward her. Please, enlighten. Just with your musical expertise. Several students practicing nearby stopped to watch. Professor Harmon emerged from her office, drawn by the commotion. I just noticed the cello entrance was early, Maya said, her voice barely audible. Claire checked, her score counting silently. She might be right, actually. Seriously. You're taking advice from the cleaning staff? Elias laughed, looking around at his growing audience. Next, she'll be conducting the symphony orchestra. Professor Richardson, the Stern theory instructor, joined the gathering. What's happening here? Our custodian has decided she's qualified to critique our quartet, Elias explained with theatrical exasperation. Professor Richardson raised his eyebrows. I see. He turned to Maya. While your enthusiasm is commendable, perhaps it's best to leave musical instruction to those qualified to provide it. The students snickered. Maya kept her eyes fixed on the piano she was polishing, her hands trembling slightly. Maya, Professor Harmon interjected gently. Could you check the recital hall? I believe there was a spill earlier. Grateful for the escape, Maya gathered her supplies and hurried away, the laughter following her down the corridor. Claire caught up with her later, between classes. You were right about my entrance, she admitted, glancing around to ensure no one overheard. Thanks. She hurried away before Maya could respond. The third humiliation came at the weekend rehearsal for the showcase. Maya wasn't scheduled to work, but Mrs. Chen had fallen ill, and Maya had promised to bring her medication. The conservatory stood between her apartment and the pharmacy, providing a shortcut through the campus. As she crossed the courtyard, she heard frantic voices from the recital hall. The door stood propped open to release the stuffy heat inside. Maya glimpsed Dean Wallace pacing the stage, where Professor Harmon, Professor Richardson, and several students huddled in conversation. What do you mean he can't perform? Dean Wallace demanded. Elias has severe tendinitis, Professor Harmon explained. The doctor ordered complete rest for at least 2 weeks. The showcase is in 3 days. Dean Wallace ran a hand through his thinning hair. The Paganini is our centerpiece. Every donor and critic in the state will be here specifically to hear it. We could reschedule Elias's performance, Professor Richardson suggested. Impossible. Programs are printed. Advertisements are out. And the Hamilton Foundation representatives are flying in specifically for Monday's performance. Dean Wallace paced faster. Who's our understudy? An uncomfortable silence fell. There isn't one, Professor Harmon admitted. No other student has prepared the caprice this semester. Maya should have kept walking, should have continued her errand and left their crisis behind. Instead, she lingered in the doorway, watching their distress. Dean Wallace spotted her. Yes? Can I help you? All. Heads turned toward her. Maya clutched her shopping bag tighter. I was just passing through. "This is a closed rehearsal," he said pointedly. Professor Harmon recognized her. "It's all right. Maya works here." "The cleaning lady," Elias clarified from where he sat with an ice pack on his wrist. His eyes narrowed. "Actually, why don't you ask her to fill in? She seems to think she knows everything about violin playing." Several students laughed. Dean Wallace didn't. "This isn't the time for jokes, Mr. Reed," he snapped. "I can play it." The words escaped before Maya could stop them. A stunned silence followed. "Excuse me?" Dean Wallace stared at her. Maya's heart pounded so hard she felt lightheaded. "I can play the Paganini." Elias burst into laughter. The other students joined in. "That's quite enough," Professor Richardson said sternly. "Young woman, I understand you might be trying to help, but this is a serious situation." "I didn't mean to interrupt," Maya said, backing toward the door. "I'm sorry." "Wait." Professor Harmon studied her curiously. "Maya, are you saying you play violin?" "Yes. And you know Paganini's 24th Caprice?" "I do." Elias rolled his eyes dramatically. "This is ridiculous." "Do you have your violin with you?" Professor Harmon asked. "No, but I could go get it." Dean Wallace checked his watch impatiently. "We don't have time for this nonsense. We need to make serious decisions about the program." "Dean Wallace," Professor Harmon said quietly, "what if she can play it? A custodian, with no formal training, performing one of the most technically demanding violin pieces ever composed." He shook his head. "I appreciate imagination, but we're dealing with reality here." Maya stood straighter. "I can bring my violin and show you." The challenge hung in the air. Dean Wallace and Professor Richardson exchanged skeptical glances. The students watched with amused disbelief. Only Professor Harmon looked thoughtful. "Fine," Dean Wallace said finally. "Bring your violin, you have 30 minutes. Maya nodded once and left, breaking into a run as soon as she cleared the doorway. 28 minutes later, Maya stood on the recital hall stage, her grandfather's violin in her hands. The audience had grown, word had spread, and curious students and faculty filled the first few rows of seats. Dean Wallace sat in the center, arms crossed. "Whenever you're ready." Maya positioned the violin under her chin. Her hands didn't shake anymore. The familiar weight of the instrument steadied her. She closed her eyes briefly, took a deep breath and began to play. The opening theme of Paganini's 24th Caprice rang out clear and confident. Her left hand danced across the fingerboard, executing perfect intervals and lightning-fast passages. Her bow control brought out every subtlety of the piece, from delicate pianissimo sections to bold, resonant fortissimos, the variation requiring ricochet bowing, the section that had troubled Elias, flowed effortlessly from her fingers. The double-stop passages sang with perfect intonation. Her body swayed slightly with the music, but her focus never wavered. As she navigated the final variation, her tempo increased precisely as written. The notes cascaded in perfect synchronization, building to the triumphant final measures. She executed the closing cadence with dramatic flair, the last note resonating through the silent hall. Maya lowered her violin slowly. No one moved. No one spoke. Professor Harmon was the first to react. She rose to her feet, applauding with tears in her eyes. Professor Richardson followed, his expression stunned. The students joined reluctantly, their faces showing confusion and disbelief. Dean Wallace remained seated, staring at Maya as if seeing her for the first time. "Where did you study?" he finally asked. "I didn't," Maya replied. "My grandfather taught me until he died when I was 12. I've taught myself since then." "That's not possible," Elias protested, his face flushed red. "You can't learn to play like that without formal training." "Apparently she can," Professor Harmon said quietly. Maya stood awkwardly, still holding her violin. "Should I play something else?" "That won't be necessary," Dean Wallace said, standing abruptly. "Professor Harmon, my office, now." He glanced at Maya. "You too." As they exited, Maya heard the explosion of conversation behind them. Claire caught her eye and gave her a small, impressed nod. Other students stared open-mouthed. Elias remained seated, his face a mask of disbelief and anger. Dean Wallace paced behind his desk while Professor Harmon sat calmly in one of the visitor chairs. Maya stood just inside the door, her violin case clutched to her chest. "This is unprecedented," he muttered. "Completely unprecedented." "It's also an opportunity," Professor Harmon replied. He stopped pacing to stare at her. "An opportunity? To put an untrained custodian on stage representing Westridge? Are you mad?" "I heard what you heard," Professor Harmon said firmly. "Her technique is impeccable. Her interpretation shows remarkable maturity. And she just played a piece that our star student has been struggling with for months." Dean Wallace turned to Maya. "How long have you worked here?" 2 years, sir. "And you've been what? Secretly practicing in the broom closet?" "I practice at home, but I listen during my shifts." Maya hesitated. "I learn a lot that way." Professor Harmon leaned forward. "Maya, why didn't you ever mention you played?" Maya looked down at her worn shoes. "No one ever asked." The simple statement hung in the air between them. Dean Wallace sighed heavily and sank into his chair. "Even if, and this is a massive if, we considered letting you perform, there are protocols, audition processes, standards." "Which she just exceeded," Professor Harmon pointed out. "She's not a student. She could be." Professor Harmon turned to Maya. "Would you be interested in studying here?" Maya blinked in surprise. "I couldn't afford—" "There are scholarships," Professor Harmon interrupted, "for exceptional talent." Dean Wallace held up his hands. "This is moving too fast. We have a showcase crisis to solve first." He studied Maya intently. "You really believe you could perform this piece on Monday? In front of a full audience? With critics present?" "Yes," Maya said simply. "If she fails, it's on my recommendation," Professor Harmon added. "But she won't fail." Dean Wallace drummed his fingers on his desk, then nodded once, decisively. "Very well. Professor Harmon will work with you tomorrow to prepare. You'll use one of the conservatory's instruments for the actual performance, no offense, but yours has seen better days." Maya nodded, a smile breaking across her face for the first time. "Don't make me regret this," he added sternly. The news spread through Westridge like wildfire. By evening, everyone knew that Maya Jiang, the quiet custodian, would be replacing Elias Reed in the showcase. The reactions ranged from disbelief to outrage to cautious curiosity. Maya arrived early the next morning to find Professor Harmon waiting at the entrance with a key to the faculty practice room. "You won't be cleaning today," she said with a smile. "You'll be practicing." They spent hours refining Maya's performance. Professor Harmon offered minor suggestions about phrasing and dynamics, but largely allowed Maya's natural interpretation to shine. "Where did you learn to play like this?" she asked during a break. Maya traced the edge of the music stand with her finger. "My grandfather was a violinist in China. He never became famous, but he loved the instrument with his whole heart. When we came to America, he couldn't find orchestra work, so he taught local children instead." "And he taught you?" Maya nodded. "Every day after school. When he died, I kept practicing. It made me feel close to him." "Why didn't you pursue music education?" "We couldn't afford it," Maya shrugged. "After he passed, my mother worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. When I finished high school, I needed to work too. So you came here as a custodian. Being around music was the next best thing to studying it formally," Maya explained. "I listen to the lessons while I work. I borrow books from the library. Sometimes I stay late to watch masterclasses from the back of the hall." Professor Harmon shook her head in amazement. "You've been here 2 years, and none of us really saw you." "People see what they expect to see," Maya replied without bitterness. "After tomorrow, they'll see something very different." Professor Harmon hesitated. "There will be resistance. Not everyone will celebrate your success." "I know. Are you ready for that?" Maya positioned her violin under her chin. "Let's make sure the music is perfect. The rest will take care of itself." Showcase night arrived with the recital hall gleaming under dramatic lighting. The lobby buzzed with well-dressed patrons, examining programs. Maya peeked through the stage door curtain at the filling seats, her heart racing. The green room behind the stage hosted the evening's performers, all students wearing formal black attire. Maya stood apart, wearing a simple black dress borrowed from Professor Harmon. It hung slightly loose on her slender frame. Claire approached hesitantly. You look nice. She gestured to Maya's carefully styled hair. Different from how you usually look. Thank you, Maya replied. Everyone's talking about you. Claire lowered her voice. Elias is furious. He told people you somehow tricked Dean Wallace. Maya's hands tightened around her borrowed violin case. I don't think that, Claire added quickly. I heard you play yesterday. You're extraordinary. Before Maya could respond, the stage manager called for places. The showcase had begun. Maya watched from the wings as other students performed. The quality was impressive. These were talented young musicians who had trained their entire lives for moments like this. Would she truly measure up? Finally, the stage manager touched her shoulder. You're next. Professor Harmon appeared beside her. Remember what we discussed. Own the stage. You belong there as much as anyone. Maya nodded and stepped into the spotlight. The audience rippled with whispers as she took position at center stage. Dean Wallace had printed inserts explaining the last-minute performer change, but seeing the custodian holding a violin clearly surprised many patrons. Maya closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. When she opened them, she caught Mrs. Chen's face in the audience beaming with pride. She hadn't known her elderly neighbor would come. The hall fell silent. Maya raised her bow and began. From the first note, she was transported. The hours of practice, years of dedication, lifetime of loving this instrument, all channeled into her performance. Her technique remained flawless, but now she played with something more, raw emotion and unfiltered passion. The demanding variations flowed one into another. Her fingers found every note with precision. Her bow danced across the strings with both power and delicacy. The acoustic perfection of the hall carried her sound to every corner of the room. When she reached the final variation, she allowed herself to push the tempo slightly beyond what she had practiced, not from nervousness, but from joy. The concluding phrases soared, and she delivered the final note with dramatic conviction. For one heartbeat, complete silence filled the hall. Then it erupted in thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, their applause building. Maya stood motionless, overwhelmed by the response. She bowed automatically, as her grandfather had taught her years ago. From the wings, she glimpsed Professor Harmon wiping tears from her eyes. In the front row, Dean Wallace applauded vigorously, while speaking animatedly to a woman in an expensive suit, presumably from the Hamilton Foundation. Maya bowed again and exited the stage, her legs suddenly weak. Backstage became chaos. Students who had ignored her for years now crowded around, asking questions all at once. Where did you learn to play like that? Have you always been this good? Why didn't you say something? Maya answered quietly, still processing what had happened. Professor Richardson pushed through the crowd, his usual stern expression replaced by astonishment. Young lady, that was remarkable, he said. Truly remarkable. Dean Wallace appeared with the Hamilton Foundation representative. Ms. Zhang, this is Margaret Hamilton. She'd like to speak with you. The elegant woman extended her hand. Extraordinary performance. Dean Wallace tells me you're self-taught? Maya nodded. Mostly. My grandfather started my training. The foundation. Hare's always looking for exceptional talent that might otherwise go undiscovered. She handed Maya a business card. We should discuss your future. As the woman walked away, Maya noticed Elias standing alone in the corner, his expression unreadable. She approached him hesitantly. Your wrist is looking better, she offered. He didn't meet her eyes. You've been able to play like that all this time? While cleaning our practice rooms? Yes. Why didn't you ever say anything? Would you have listened? His silence answered her question. Professor Harmon joined them, placing a hand on Maya's shoulder. The Hamilton Foundation is interested in establishing a special scholarship for you. Maya's eyes widened. Really? They're quite impressed. As am I. Professor Harmon smiled. We'll need to discuss arrangements if you'll be joining us as a student next semester. A student, Maya repeated, testing the word. Elias looked between them. So she's just going to become a student here, just like that? Talent like hers can't be ignored, Professor Harmon replied firmly, even if we manage to do so for far too long. Elias shook his head and walked away. Maya watched him go with mixed emotions. Don't worry about him, Professor Harmon said. He'll adjust. I never wanted to embarrass anyone, Maya said quietly. I just wanted to play. And now you will. Professor Harmon squeezed her shoulder. On your own terms. 6 months later, Maya emerged from advanced theory class, chatting with Claire about their upcoming chamber music assignment. Her student ID badge hung around her neck, still feeling foreign against her conservatory sweater. The Hamilton Foundation scholarship covered her full tuition and a modest living stipend. She'd quit her custodian position, though she still nodded hello to the cleaning staff every morning. Professor Richardson called out as she passed his office. Ms. Zhang, don't forget your jury pieces need to be submitted by Friday. I won't. Forget, Professor. The fall showcase posters lined the hallway. Maya's name appeared third on the program, not headlining yet, but prominently featured. She paused to look at it, still amazed by the sight of her name in print. Elias approached, violin case in hand. Their relationship had evolved gradually, from awkward avoidance to cautious professional respect. He nodded at the poster. Tchaikovsky for your solo. Bold choice. I like a challenge, Maya replied. He hesitated. Some of us are getting coffee before quartet rehearsal, if you want to join. The invitation wasn't particularly warm, but it was genuine, an acknowledgement that she belonged in their world now. I'd like that, she said, as they walked toward Ina. The cafe. Maya glanced back at the gleaming floors she used to mop. A new custodian worked steadily, headphones in her ears, mostly invisible to the passing students. Maya detoured briefly. Excuse me, she called. The young woman looked up in surprise, removing one earbud. What are you listening to? Maya asked. Oh. The woman blushed slightly. Brahms, I like classical music. Maya smiled. Me too. She glanced at Elias, waiting by the door. Would you like to join us for coffee? I'd love to hear more about your taste in music. The woman's eyes widened. Really? Really? Maya extended her hand. I'm Maya. Eleanor, the woman replied, shaking her hand tentatively. Come on, Maya said. I know what it's like to be invisible, but sometimes all it takes is one person really. Seeing you. As they joined the others, Maya caught Professor Harmon watching from across the hall with an approving smile. The circle was expanding. This time, everyone had a place. Sometimes our greatest talents remain hidden, not because we lack the courage to reveal them, but because others lack the wisdom to look beyond appearances. The world is filled with extraordinary abilities waiting, in ordinary packages, remarkable gifts concealed behind unremarkable facades. The true measure of character lies not in the talent itself, but in how we recognize and nurture it in others. For in seeing the unseen potential around us, we ultimately discover the best within ourselves.